Why did everyone fall silent when she walked onto the training field? Maybe it was the hour, 5:30 hours, the air still cold, the horizon barely bruised with light. Or maybe it was the way she carried herself. Rigid spine, chin level, gaze steady. Lieutenant Mara Sullivan stood alone in formation, a solitary figure amid 60 men built like the embodiment of defiance. The California dawn cut like glass, but it wasn't the chill that bit her skin. It was the heat of eyes, curious, mocking, suspicious. Every pair of them drifted to the mark on her arm, a black widow spider, legs fanned, web trailing down the inside of her forearm. Sergeant Kyle Drake's voice slashed the quiet. "This is SEAL training, sweetheart, not a beach party. What's next? Butterflies on your ankle." The laughter that followed wasn't friendly. It was sharp and knowing, the kind that tries to cut deeper than words should be allowed to. Mara didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her breathing remained even, controlled, the kind of rhythm born from years of conditioning. To them, her silence looked like compliance. To her, it was armor. Someone in the back muttered, "Bet she got it spring break," thought it'd make her look tough for recruiters. Only one other woman stood among them. Lieutenant Jessica Thorne, assistant instructor, 2 years into her trident. Her expression carried no solidarity, only the fatigue of someone who'd fought too long for the right to stand here and now resented anyone who might dilute her hard-won ground. When Instructor Walsh approached, the laughter died down. His face was lined from 2 decades in places the world pretended didn't exist. He studied the tattoo too carefully for too long. "Lieutenant Sullivan," he said, voice clipped, "that marking have some special meaning?" Her eyes met his. "Yes, sir." "Care to elaborate?" "No, sir." The pause afterward felt heavier than the 60-pound ruck on every trainee's back. Then Drake chuckled, a low, deliberate sound meant to reignite the derision, and the pack followed, laughing again. They mistook mystery for weakness. They thought silence meant she had something to hide. They were right, but not in the way they imagined. They would learn soon enough. Walsh's gaze lingered a moment longer, then he gestured sharply. "Fall in for morning PT, 5-mile run. Sullivan, you're on point. Let's see if that ink can keep pace." Boots struck asphalt in unison as the formation moved out. Mara took position at the front. She felt Drake fall in behind her, close, too close. "Going to enjoy watching you break," he whispered. "They all break." She didn't answer. Words were bullets. She'd learned long ago not to waste ammunition. The run began under a sky shifting from black to deep purple. She found her rhythm within the first 100 meters, steady, deliberate, sustainable. Mile by mile, the formation began to splinter. Some pushed too hard, others lagged, breath ragged. She kept the same pace, even, mechanical. By the second mile, she'd overtaken most of them without trying. By the third, she was ahead of 60% of the unit. From a checkpoint, Master Chief Tom Harrison watched through binoculars. "Interesting," he murmured, jotting a note. "She's not even winded." At mile 3, Drake caught up, breath harsher than hers. He pushed harder, she matched. He sprinted, she maintained. When he finally fell back, sweat blurring his vision, she kept moving, expression unreadable. Top 15%. Not first. Never first. Drawing too much attention was as dangerous as failure. At the finish line, Drake doubled over, gulping air, trying to sound casual. "Beginner's luck," he said. "Let's see how she handles real training." The real training came fast. Obstacle course, full combat load. 12 minutes was the standard. Walsh called her forward. "Since you're so eager to prove yourself, Sullivan, 60 pounds in your ruck instead of 30. Show us what that spider means." She didn't hesitate. Adjusted straps, tested balance. The extra weight settled like an old friend. At the whistle, she moved. The wall came first, 12 feet of weathered wood. Most relied on brute force. She relied on technique. 2 steps, jump, grip, pivot, heel over the top. Down the other side before the next candidate had reached halfway. The rope climb followed. 60 feet of coarse hemp that tore skin. She ascended with a rhythm too smooth for a beginner. Wrap, lock, pull, repeat. On the sidelines, Corporal Ryan Jensen leaned against a crate, eyes following her gear bag instead of her. His hand drifted toward her water bottle. A small puncture, barely visible, would empty it over the next few hours. Enough to dehydrate, not enough to kill. "Leave it alone," said Corporal Emetors behind him, arms crossed, tone level. Jensen straightened, feigning innocence. "Just checking the equipment." "Sure you were," she said. "Remember, actions have consequences." Back on the course, Mara cleared the final barrier, landing light despite the weight. 11 minutes, 42 seconds. Walsh stared at his stopwatch, frowning. Double the load, still top 20%. Impossible, or so he thought. Lieutenant Bell, observing from the tower, scribbled notes of his own. Her movement patterns were too refined. Not learned here. Learned somewhere harder. The afternoon brought weapons qualification. The smell of gun oil clung to the air like memory. Walsh called her forward. "You said you studied the manual. Field strip this M4, 2 minutes." She took the rifle. Press, release, slide. Upper separated from lower, bolt carrier group extracted, pieces laid out with geometric precision. 47 seconds. "Too fast," Walsh muttered. "Blindfolded then." The room murmured. That wasn't regulation, it was spectacle. Mara tied the blindfold herself. Her hands moved through the parts as though reading Braille. The clicks of reassembly were like a metronome, calm, confident, exact. 49 seconds. Walsh's mouth thinned. "Lucky guess. Let's see you try something you haven't memorized." He motioned to the M249 saw on the next table. "Strip it." The saw was advanced, heavy, unforgiving. But her fingers moved with the same calm certainty. Gas regulator off, barrel free, feed tray lifted, bolt extracted. 43 seconds. Reassembled in 45. Silence followed, the kind that vibrates with disbelief. When Walsh turned away, Thorne's voice threaded through the ranks, soft enough to sound casual, loud enough to plant poison. Someone must have coached her. No way she learned that in basic. Probably a quota case. The rumor spread before the day ended. Suspicion multiplies faster than truth. Captain David Morris watched from his office window, arms folded. 28 years in uniform had taught him to trust instinct, and his instincts hated anomalies. To him, she wasn't a trainee. She was a problem, a variable in a system that demanded predictability. By dusk, the sky over Coronado turned the color of burnt copper. The trainees dispersed to the mess hall. Mara didn't. She remained at the pistol range, alone, methodical. Load, aim, fire, drop mag, reload, every motion exact. Petty Officer Sarah Chen watched from the shed, broom in hand, breaking regulations just by speaking. "Permission to talk, ma'am." Mara lowered the weapon. "You don't need permission. Sun's down, we're equal now." Chen hesitated. "Don't let them get to you, it's not right." "They're testing me," Mara said softly. "Not like this." "The test isn't what they do," Mara replied. "It's what I choose to do in response." Her tone was calm, but the words carried weight, the kind earned, not rehearsed. The next morning brought another 5-mile run, but Drake had a new game. "Sullivan leads again," he announced, "but this time she sets the pace. Anyone falls behind, we all run another 5. Let's see how popular she is after that." If she ran too fast, they'd hate her. Too slow, they'd despise her. Either way, he'd win. She chose steady discomfort. The perfect trap deserved a perfect counter. By mile 4, grudging respect replaced resentment. Nobody fell out. She had turned the punishment into unity. By the finish line, even Drake couldn't twist it. Later, during a water break, Captain Morris approached. His expression was carved from concrete. "Sullivan, I'm recommending dismissal. You can withdraw voluntarily and keep your dignity, or wait for the paperwork." She met his eyes. With respect, sir, I'm not withdrawing. You don't belong here. It's not about standards, it's about fit, cohesion. If my presence creates friction, she said, voice level, then maybe the friction's the problem, not my presence. I've met every requirement, exceeded most. Perception matters. Perception, she said quietly, changes slower than truth, but it still changes. He stared at her for a long moment, jaw flexing. Final assessment, tomorrow, 600 hours, combat scenario, you fail, you're gone. When he walked away, the words hung like a sentence, but she didn't look defeated, just calculating. That night she found her canteen empty. A tiny puncture near the base told the story. Sabotage. Again. She didn't file a complaint, just replaced it. Tors found her after lights out, whispering, "Jensen, been messing with your gear. I saw him." "Appreciate it." "Why not report it?" "Because paperwork doesn't fix character," Mara said, "and drama distracts from mission. I handle my own problems." Tors studied her silhouette in the dim light. "You're not like other people." "We're all the same," Mara answered. "The difference shows when bullets fly." Before dawn, floodlights snapped on across the mock combat village. 2 teams, blue team led by Mara, red team led by Drake. Hostage rescue simulation. The air tasted of adrenaline and salt. As her team stacked on the door, she used hand signals that came too easily for a novice. Buttonhook entry, slice the pie, clear left. Movements flowed like choreography. Inside the control room, Commander Jack Reeves watched the monitors. He'd seen those patterns before, not in training, on missions that didn't officially exist. Room 1 cleared. Room 2, 3 hostiles neutralized, 0 casualties. Room 3, trap, fatal funnel. She read it instantly. Instead of breaching the door, she cut through an adjacent wall, entering from an angle no one expected. 11 minutes, 34 seconds, fastest time on record. When the exercise ended, the silence was heavier than gunfire. Drake approached, mask of professionalism cracking. "You got lucky," he hissed. "That won't work in real combat." "Real combat," she said evenly, "doesn't care about your scenarios. It rewards adaptation." He stepped closer. "You think you're special. I think results speak louder than rank." His hand shot out, gripping her shoulder. "Listen here." "Sergeant Drake." The voice cut through everything. Commander Reeves descended from the observation deck, boots echoing. His presence carried decades of unseen wars. He studied Mara's forearm, the spider, the web. "That tattoo," he said slowly, "where'd you get it?" For the first time, a flicker crossed her eyes. Not fear, calculation. "Personal significance, sir." "I'm sure it is." His tone changed, colder. "And I'm sure you know exactly why I'm asking." Captain Morris frowned. "Commander, I don't see the relevance." "That's because you don't know what you're looking at, Captain." Reeves didn't look away. "Lieutenant Sullivan, come with me. We have things to discuss." The training yard buzzed with whispers as they walked away together. Inside the command building, behind a closed door and shaded windows, Reeves opened a metal case. He placed something on the desk. A challenge coin, silver edges dulled by years. Its design, a black widow spider with 7 stars beneath it. Mara's composure cracked for the first time. Her eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "I received this coin 12 years ago," Reeves said quietly. "From a man who saved my team in a valley that doesn't exist on any map. He wore that mark. Said only 7 people in the world had earned it. All reported KIA. He looked at her. "So either you stole that design or you shouldn't exist." Mara's fingers touched the coin, tracing familiar grooves. When she spoke, her voice carried something new, authority. "Everything you said, Commander, is classified beyond your clearance." Reeves straightened. "Then give me what you can. Why are you really here?" Her silence lasted long enough to feel like an answer. Then, quietly, "I'm testing the system. seeing if it can judge competence without bias. If I fail, they'll say women can't make it. If I succeed with privilege, they'll say it doesn't count. I have to succeed while appearing ordinary. Reeves stared, realization dawning. You're not ordinary, you're Shadow Unit 7. Which is why it stays covered. Before he could reply, the door burst open. Intelligence Officer Rachel Kim entered, breath clipped. Commander, I need access to Lieutenant Sullivan's full service record. Her metrics triggered red flags, possible identity compromise. The room froze. Reeves bought time with carefully chosen words. That file's compartmentalized beyond standard clearance. We'll coordinate through proper channels. Kim's eyes narrowed. She's restricted to base pending verification. When she left, the silence returned, sharper than before. Your evaluation just got complicated, Reeves said. They'll shut you down before you finish. Then I'll accelerate the timeline, Mara replied. One more evaluation. I'll give them something they can't ignore. Reeves studied her like a man staring at the fuse of a lit explosive. You're going to blow your cover. She met his gaze, better on my terms than theirs. Outside, the sun was rising over the Pacific, gold on steel, calm before the next storm. Why did Captain Morris look so satisfied that morning? Because he thought he'd won. By accelerating Mara Sullivan's evaluation, he believed he'd cornered her. That this final test, brutal, impossible, designed to break the unbreakable, would expose her limits once and for all. But as the California sun climbed over the mock urban combat facility, its glare washing the compound in blinding white, Mara wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about timing. This wasn't just another evaluation. It was a controlled detonation. Captain Morris stood on the command platform, clipboard in hand, his expression calm but predatory. Scenario briefing, he announced to the assembled trainees. Hostage rescue. 3 hostages held by hostile forces in a multi-story structure. Blue team led by Lieutenant Sullivan. Red team commanded by Sergeant Drake. Standard safety protocols. Simulated rounds. Maximum time, 12 minutes. Failure in any parameter results in dismissal. He paused, eyes on Mara. Let's see if merit still talks when the system stops listening. Mara stood silent, helmet on, rifle cradled, face painted in green and black patterns that made her eyes impossible to read. Her team, 4 trainees, looked at her like she was already a ghost. They hadn't volunteered. They'd been chosen at random. None of them wanted to follow her lead. Drake's red team occupied the building, every floor fortified. He designed his defenses to be cruelly efficient, overlapping angles, kill zones, narrow corridors. Every entry point a trap. Walsh called out the countdown. Scenario begins in 60 seconds. Mara turned to her team, listened carefully. Her voice, for the first time, held something commanding, quiet authority that didn't ask for belief. It demanded it. I know most of you don't trust me, she said. That's fine. You don't need to, you just need to trust what I see. You follow my orders exactly, no hesitation, no improvisation. Do that and we'll be done in under 8 minutes. Her words hung in the dry air, implausible, impossible. Seaman Jake Morrison, barely 19, still too young to hide his skepticism, asked, How can you be sure? Because, Mara said evenly, locking her weapon into position, I've done this before, for real. The buzzer sounded, G.O. She didn't use the front entrance, didn't even glance at it. Instead, she circled the structure, her eyes scanning angles, calculating blind spots. She moved with preternatural calm, every step measured. Her team followed reluctantly, breathing hard under the weight of uncertainty. They stopped at the rear section of the building. No windows, no doors, only ventilation shafts. To the untrained eye, it was a dead end. To Mara, it was an opportunity. She knelt, pried open a vent barely large enough for a person. This is our way in. You're kidding, one of them muttered. I'm not. Without hesitation, she slid inside. The narrow metal walls scraped her armor, but she moved like water through the impossible, flexible, focused, utterly unafraid. Her team hesitated, exchanged glances, then followed. Inside, the world changed. The air was still. The noise from outside faded into the rhythmic sound of breathing and crawling. Myra's voice came soft through comms. Slow and quiet, don't think, follow. They emerged into the basement level, completely behind enemy lines. Above, Drake's men were watching the front and side entrances. None of them knew their target was already inside. Reeves watched from the control room, leaning forward. "She's in the structure," he said quietly. "How?" No one answered. On screen, her movements were fluid. Hand signals, stack formation, synchronized sweeps. Nothing taught at this stage of training. She cleared the first floor in 90 seconds. Then the second. Drake's team realized something was wrong only when simulated rounds started marking their sensors. Clean shots, center mass. "Contact," Drake yelled through his comms, repositioning. Mara's team flowed through corridors like smoke, unpredictable and fast. Even the hesitant ones now followed her instinctively. Confidence was contagious. By the time they reached the third floor, they were ahead of schedule. The hostages were held there, 2 men, 1 woman. But Mara could see the trap before stepping through. Drake had positioned shooters in a classic funnel. Anyone breaching the door would be shredded, even in simulation. Mara studied the layout, mentally mapping angles. Then she pointed, not to the door but the adjacent wall. "Explosive breach," she ordered. Her team hesitated. "There's no breach charge in this scenario," Morrison said. She smiled faintly. "There's always a way." Using a shaped training charge from her vest, improvised but precise, she blew through the drywall, entering from an angle Drake hadn't fortified. The noise was deafening, the outcome decisive. 3 seconds later, the final simulated gunfire ceased. "Hostages secured," Mara called over comms. "0 casualties." The timer read, 11 minutes 34 seconds. Commander Reeves blinked. "That's impossible." Captain Morris didn't move. His jaw tightened, but his face was pale. When Blue Team exited, helmets under their arms, the crowd was silent. Drake stepped forward, fury leaking through his professionalism. "You got lucky," he snapped. "That was improvisation, not discipline." "Adaptation," Mara corrected quietly. "The battlefield rewards it." "You think you're special," his voice trembled. "That little spider tattoo make you bulletproof." "No," she said, eyes level. "It just reminds me what I've survived." He stepped closer, close enough that his breath brushed her face. "You're not supposed to be here." "Maybe not," she said, "but here I am." His hand shot out, gripping her vest. The fabric tore. For a moment, time froze. The sunlight hit her exposed arm, and the tattoo, no longer just a spider, came alive. The web extended across her skin, intricate, geometric, almost mathematical. Within its strands, coordinates. 31 degrees 47, and 35 degrees 13, E. And beneath the spider's body, 7 stars. Everything stopped. Morrison stared, uncomprehending. Walsh removed his sunglasses, squinting at what he thought he recognized but couldn't believe. Commander Reeves' hand went to his chest, where, beneath his uniform, an identical mark rested, etched in scar tissue and memory. The realization hit like a thunderclap. "Shadow Unit 7. The words whispered through the formation like wind through tall grass. The legend was supposed to be myth. 7 operators who survived an operation that annihilated everyone else. A mission so classified that even mentioning it could trigger prosecution. Now one of them stood on their training ground. Drake stepped back like he'd touched a live wire. Thorne's hand went to her mouth. Morris didn't move at all. His face was blank, beyond comprehension, beyond denial. Reeves descended from the tower, boots striking pavement, every step heavy with the weight of revelation. He stopped in front of her and snapped to attention. His salute was perfect, deliberate, ceremonial. "Lieutenant Commander Sullivan," he said, loud enough for every soul to hear. "Shadow Unit 7, Operation Damascus Gate, March 2009. You saved my team that night." The words shattered the silence. Mara returned the salute with equal precision. "Commander Reeves," she said, voice calm but deep with emotion. "Good to see you made it. You were the pilot who extracted the survivors." Reeves nodded, his throat tight. "You stayed behind to cover us. We thought you were KIA. I carried your coin for 12 years. Her eyes softened. "You flew us out when nobody else would. You earned that coin." It wasn't ceremony. It was recognition between ghosts. Around them, whispers became stunned silence. Every face reflected some mix of awe, guilt, or disbelief. Captain Morris finally spoke. "That operation, it's classified above." "It was," Reeves interrupted. "Not anymore, not the fact that it happened, and not who survived it." Lieutenant Thorne looked pale. "They said everyone in Shadow Unit 7 was dead." "Officially," Mara said. "Unofficially, we were reassigned, buried under aliases, buried deeper under lies." Walsh took a step forward, voice trembling. "I read fragments of that after-action report. 18 operators went in against over 300 enemy combatants. Only 7 made it out. That mission should have been a massacre." "It was," Mara said softly. "We just refused to die." Morrison dropped to one knee, overwhelmed by reverence he didn't understand. "Ma'am, why come back here? Why put yourself through this?" Mara looked across the field, the same field where laughter had once followed her silence. "Because I needed to know if this system could evolve, if capability alone was enough to earn belonging." Her gaze turned toward Morris, "So I let it judge me." The words cut deeper than accusation. They were truth, heavy and unflinching. Morris swallowed hard. "You let me try to fail you." "I needed unfiltered conditions," she replied. "The test only works if the environment acts naturally. Every insult, every sabotage attempt, every false judgment, it all mattered. It proved the problem wasn't capability, it was perception." Thorne took a hesitant step forward. "And I made that perception worse. I turned other women against you." "You did what the system trained you to do," Mara said. "To see other women as competition because space was scarce. You weren't my enemy. The system was." Silence followed, genuine silence, born not of discipline but realization. Commander Reeves turned to face the crowd. "Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's evaluation was authorized by Special Warfare Command," he said firmly. "Her role here was to test whether integration could succeed under real conditions. You've just witnessed the answer." Morris nodded slowly, the last of his denial fading. "She succeeded." "Beyond measure," Reeves' tone softened. "And she did it without revealing who she was. That's what makes the data uncorrupted." From the edge of the field, Intelligence Officer Kim appeared, tablet in hand, her earlier suspicion now replaced by something closer to humility. "I received confirmation from SOCOM," she announced. "Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's assignment was classified under Joint Directive 17. My investigation was triggered intentionally to test our response to anomalies." She turned to Mara. "You manipulated the system to test the testers." "I measured how far bias could go before truth intervened," Mara said, "and how much integrity it would take to survive it." Kim nodded, faint smile forming. "You succeeded." The base was alive now with whispers, operators, trainees, officers, all trying to process what they'd witnessed. Some felt shame, others awe. Commander Reeves raised his voice once more. "Effective immediately, Lieutenant Commander Sullivan's evaluation is complete. Her assignment transitions to oversight capacity. Captain Morris, your recommendations." Morris stood stiff, then straightened. I recommend Lieutenant Commander Sullivan not only complete the program but remain as permanent instructor. And he hesitated. I apologize deeply. My failure wasn't procedural, it was moral. Mara inclined her head. Acknowledged, Captain. Then Drake stepped forward. His face, stripped of arrogance, held only regret. Ma'am, I crossed every line. The sabotage, the aggression, I have no excuse. Mara studied him for a long moment. You'll face the consequences, she said evenly. But you also gave me data, proof of how easily hostility can override professionalism. That proof will help fix what's broken. He blinked, unprepared for grace. You're not filing charges. Consequences aren't vengeance, she said. They're education, learn, change. Then teach better than you behaved. Thorne approached next, voice trembling. I judged you before I even met you. And now? Thorne swallowed. Now I know strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks quietly into the fire and doesn't tell anyone it's burning. For the first time, Mara's expression softened into something close to gratitude. Then the evaluation worked. As the crowd began to disperse, whispers replaced by a hush of respect, Commander Reeves turned to her. So what now? Mara looked toward the setting sun, its light cutting through the Pacific haze. Now, she said, we stop testing individuals. We start testing the system. He nodded slowly, and Shadow Unit 7. Her eyes flickered, unreadable. It was never meant to die, just to wait until it was needed again. Reeves exhaled, and is it needed now? She looked out over the trainees, men and women who'd mocked her days earlier, now standing in silent awe. More than ever. The wind picked up, carrying salt and the faint smell of spent gunpowder. Somewhere in the distance, a bell signaled the end of the exercise. But for Mara Sullivan, the real mission had just begun. Why did the base fall silent that night? Not from exhaustion, they'd endured worse, but from revelation. The kind that changed everything. Word spread faster than official channels could contain. The female trainee with the spider tattoo wasn't just another candidate trying to prove herself. She was Lieutenant Commander Mara Sullivan, veteran of missions no one was allowed to discuss, survivor of an operation that had rewritten the quiet chapters of special warfare history. And now, her secret had detonated in front of the entire training command. The ripple effects were immediate. By sunrise, half the command chain had filed formal reports, each trying to explain, justify, or distance themselves from what had unfolded. The other half stayed silent, not from negligence but fear. Fear of what this meant, fear of how deep her presence had been authorized, fear of what she represented. Commander Reeves spent the night writing his own report, every word chosen carefully, balanced between truth and survivable truth. By morning, he'd written 57 pages and deleted 35. Some truths couldn't exist on paper. At 600, he found Mara sitting on the steps outside the command building. No uniform jacket, just fatigues and a black t-shirt, coffee in hand, watching the Pacific waves roll in like the calm after artillery fire. You didn't sleep, Reeves said. I stopped needing much sleep a long time ago, she replied without turning. It's a habit from places where rest wasn't safe. He sat beside her, silence stretching between them. Finally, he asked, You knew this would happen, didn't you? Eventually. Not like that. No, she admitted, not like that. For a long moment, they just listened to the rhythm of the surf, nature's version of breathing. Reeves finally broke the quiet. SOCOM called at 400. The story's moving up the chain fast. They're pulling all your files. Command wants a meeting by noon. Let them pull, she said calmly. They'll find what they're meant to find. He turned to study her face, unreadable, composed, but there was something beneath it. Fatigue, maybe, or grief that had grown too disciplined to show itself. You realize, he said slowly, this changes everything. The program, the command structure, maybe even integration policy across all branches. That's the point, she replied. Change doesn't come from comfort. Reeves gave a faint, humorless smile. You sound like someone preparing for war. I am. She took a sip of her coffee. It's just not the kind fought with weapons. The meeting that afternoon was electric. In a room filled with officers who'd spent decades guarding the walls of tradition, Mara's presence was both a challenge and a mirror. Captain Morris sat at the far end of the table, pale but present. Commander Reeves at her right. Intelligence Officer Rachel Kim on her left, tablet glowing with classified clearance icons. General Patricia Foster, 2 stars, sharp mind, sharper eyes, led the session via secure link. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan, she began, voice cool but steady. Your assignment was authorized under Joint Directive 17A, but the manner of its revelation has created complications. Yes, ma'am, Mara replied evenly. Your evaluation was meant to remain classified until completion. I understand. Do you? The general leaned forward on the screen. Because right now, my inbox is filled with questions from senators, journalists, and admirals who want to know how a supposedly dead Tier 1 operator ended up in SEAL training under an alias. Mara met her gaze without flinching. With respect, ma'am, that's not the real question. The real question is why someone like me had to go undercover in the first place. A hush followed. Even Foster, accustomed to bluntness, paused. Explain. If the system truly believed women could meet the same standards, Mara said, voice controlled but resonant, you wouldn't need someone like me to prove it anonymously. You'd already know it. Morris shifted in his seat. Foster regarded Mara for a long moment, then exhaled. Point taken. She turned to Kim. Your assessment. Kim adjusted her glasses, scrolling through her tablet. Performance metrics beyond exemplary. 0 recorded deficiencies. Psychological stability above Tier 1 norms. Tactical execution suggests prior field experience, confirmed now, obviously. Foster nodded. And the behavioral data. Kim hesitated. Consistent pattern of isolation, self-control, and moral restraint under duress. She tolerated harassment without retaliation, bias without complaint, sabotage without exposure. Why? Foster asked, eyes back on Mara. Mara's answer came quietly. Because exposure ruins the experiment, and without data, nothing changes. The general's expression softened just slightly, respect hidden under professionalism. You're aware of what happens next, then. Policy review, Mara replied. Debriefings, internal investigation, maybe a few polite demands that I disappear again. Foster smiled faintly. You've done your homework. I was the homework. The general nodded slowly, her tone shifting from formal to something almost personal. You've made enemies, Commander, powerful ones, but you've also forced them to confront their own contradictions. That's rare. Rare doesn't mean safe, Mara said. No, Foster agreed, but safety never changes systems. A pause followed, the kind that felt like an agreement made between soldiers rather than bureaucrats. That evening, the sunset spilled fire across the base. Training had been suspended, officially for safety reviews, unofficially because no one could focus. Mara walked through the empty field, past the obstacle course that had nearly broken her shoulders, past the shooting range where she'd stripped rifles blindfolded while laughter echoed behind her. Now it was silent. Silence, she realized, could mean respect just as easily as hostility. She stopped at the rope-climbed tower. The fibers still bore faint traces of blood from hands too raw to quit. Tors appeared beside her. They're saying your file crashed the base server. Mara raised an eyebrow. That's impressive. They also said commands, rewriting entire sections of the integration manual. That your report's already in DC. Mara gave a faint nod. That was the goal. Tor studied her face. So that's it, you finish your mission and vanish again. Maybe, Mara said, that's what shadows do. But this time, people know you exist. Mara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Knowing isn't the same as understanding. Tors frowned. You sound tired. I am, Mara admitted, but not from the fight, from the pretending. 2 days later, the message arrived. Encrypted, SOCOM routing, single line authorization. Directive, report to Joint Command, Washington, D.C. 900 hours. She packed light. No medals, no insignia, just essentials. The Black Widow tattoo remained visible, no longer something to hide. On the flight east, Mara watched clouds drift below, her reflection in the cabin window superimposed over the horizon. Somewhere between the steel and the sky, she wondered how many years she'd spent proving things that shouldn't have needed proof. When the plane touched down, a black SUV waited on the tarmac. Inside sat General Foster. Commander Sullivan, she greeted, extending a hand. Welcome to the other battlefield. The Pentagon felt different when you'd once been erased from its records. Conference Room 3C-145, polished wood, frosted glass, and too much silence. The walls themselves seemed to hold secrets. Around the table sat representatives from every branch of special operations. Their faces reflected rank, experience, and skepticism. Foster began. Commander Sullivan's field evaluation produced conclusive results. Current training culture exhibits systemic bias independent of measurable performance. We are here to discuss reform. An older Marine general cleared his throat. With respect, ma'am, isolated incidents don't prove systemic issues. Mara leaned forward. With respect, sir, it's not isolated when every woman who enters the system experiences the same obstacles. That's pattern, not coincidence. He bristled. You're basing this on personal interpretation. I'm basing it on data, she said. Documented sabotage attempts, recorded disparities in evaluation language, identical performance rated lower when associated with a female name. You don't need interpretation for math. Foster smirked faintly. She's got you there, Frank. Another officer, Navy, skeptical but less combative, interjected. And what do you suggest we do, Commander? Start with transparency, Mara said. Review training footage with blind evaluation teams, remove gender identifiers. Let performance stand alone. Then, rotate instructors to prevent entrenched bias. Finally, expand cross-unit mentorship between male and female candidates to rebuild trust from within. The room was quiet, not hostile, thoughtful. One of the Air Force representatives finally said, "That's reasonable." Foster nodded, "and actionable." The meeting stretched for hours. Arguments flared, compromises formed, but through it all, Mara held her ground. She didn't lecture. She reasoned. She used the same patience that had kept her alive in firefights and interrogation rooms alike. By the time they adjourned, something had shifted. A door that had been sealed shut for decades had opened, just a fraction, but enough. That night, Foster found her alone in the courtyard outside the Pentagon. The wind was cold, and the stars over D.C. felt dim compared to those over the Pacific. You know, Foster said quietly, I read your entire report twice. Mara looked up. Then you know the cost. Yes, Foster said, and that's why I'm not just filing it. I'm acting on it. I'm forming a task force to redesign integration protocols across every special operations branch, and I want you to lead it. Mara blinked. That's a political nightmare waiting to happen. Foster smiled. Then it's perfect for someone who doesn't scare easily. Mara hesitated. And Shadow Unit 7. Foster's smile faded. Still buried, but not forgotten. Some of us still carry their ghosts. Ghosts don't fade, Mara murmured. They just wait for purpose. Foster studied her, thoughtful. Then maybe it's time they found one. She reached into her briefcase and slid a small envelope across the bench. Inside, a security clearance upgrade and a new designation: Commander, Special Integration Task Force. "Congratulations," Foster said. "You're about to make a lot of enemies." "I already have," Mara replied softly. When Mara returned to Coronado a week later, everything felt different. The whispers had turned into salutes. The same instructors who once mocked her now stood straighter when she passed. But respect, she knew, was fragile, often conditional. She wasn't here for validation. She was here for transformation. Drake had been reassigned to administrative duty pending disciplinary review. Thorne was transferred to an integration policy group, her own redemption arc quietly beginning. Torres, Chen, Morrison, the ones who'd believed or at least listened, were still here. They watched her now with quiet pride. At sunset, as the Pacific shimmered gold, Reeves found her again. 2 coffees in hand, a new ritual between soldiers who understood silence better than speech. "DC change you?" he asked. "It reminded me why change matters." He sipped his coffee. "They're saying you're building something new." "I'm rebuilding something old," she said. "Something the world pretended didn't exist." He frowned. "Shadow Unit 7. She nodded once. "The world thinks we were ghosts. Maybe it's time the ghosts started recruiting." Reeves stared at her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "I always am." "Who?" "People who already proved what others couldn't see. The underestimated, the overlooked, the ones who fight quietly and win loudly." He smiled faintly. "You're going to start another war." "No," she said. "I'm going to finish one." The sun slipped beneath the horizon, leaving only the hush of waves and the reflection of stars. Mara looked down at her tattoo, the spider, the 7 stars, and whispered to no one in particular. "Once we fought for survival, now we fight for understanding." And in the gathering dark, the first ghost of Shadow Unit 7 began to rise again. Why was she walking alone down the shoreline, long after the others had gone? Because some wars don't end when the shooting stops, they just move inside you. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead, a mirror of steel and sorrow. Mara Sullivan walked with her boots half buried in the wet sand, waves washing away every footprint behind her. It was fitting. Shadows weren't supposed to leave traces. Her assignment had shifted. Officially, she was now Commander, Special Integration Task Force, stationed under direct supervision of General Foster. Unofficially, she was building something that didn't yet have a name, a quiet resurrection of Shadow Unit 7. But this time, it wouldn't be an elite secret built on silence. It would be built on something harder: trust. Trust, she knew, was rarer than loyalty. Loyalty could be commanded, trust had to be earned. The first candidate arrived 3 weeks later. Petty Officer Ava Ramirez, 28, EOD specialist, record spotless, except for one detail. Discharged after refusing an unethical order in a forward deployment zone. Labeled non-compliant. Mara read her file twice. Non-compliant, she thought, often meant conscience intact. When Ramirez entered the dim-lit hangar that served as Mara's temporary operations base, she stood stiff, unsure if this was an interrogation or a second chance. "You know why you're here?" Mara asked, voice even. Ramirez shook her head. "They said special reassignment, didn't say what kind." Mara placed a file on the table. "You were right to refuse that detonation order in Helmand. 3 civilians were inside the compound." Ramirez's eyes flicked up, shock, suspicion, gratitude. "You read the after-action report." "I wrote part of it," Mara said, "back when I was invisible." Silence, then Mara leaned forward slightly. "What do you believe in, Ramirez?" The younger woman hesitated. "Doing what's right, even when no one's watching." "That's the wrong answer for most commands," Mara said, "but exactly the right one for mine." "Ma'am." "You're being recruited," Mara said simply. Shadow Unit 7 is coming back, different mission, same purpose, to do what others can't or won't. Ramirez blinked. I thought that was a myth. Mara's eyes held hers. So did everyone else. Candidate 2 came uninvited. Sergeant Leo Anders, 31, Army Ranger cross-trained with Marine Force Recon, transferred after a failed hostage rescue left 2 civilians dead. Command called it tactical error. His men called it a setup. Mara had seen his name buried in a redacted list years ago. When she found him sitting in a cheap motel off-base, nursing guilt like it was the only thing keeping him alive, she knew he didn't need convincing. "What makes you think I'd want back in?" he asked bitterly. "Because you never really left," Mara said. "You're still looking for a way to make it mean something." He laughed once, harsh and tired. "You talk like someone who's seen the afterlife and came back." "I did," she said softly. "Now I'm building an army of the dead." He stared at her, confusion giving way to recognition. "You're her, the one from Coronado, the spider." "Call me Mara," she said. "And yes, that was me." "What's this unit of yours supposed to do?" "Same thing it did before. Go where we're not wanted, fix what politics can't." "And what's the cost?" Mara's expression didn't change. Everything worth doing costs something. The question is whether the price feels justified when it's over. He looked away, jaw tight. "What makes you think I still care?" "Because you didn't say no," she replied. By the end of the month, there were 5 of them. Ramirez, Anders, Torres pulled quietly from Coronado, her faith in Mara unshaken. Captain Will Harker, a pilot grounded after disobeying a direct order to retreat. And Dr. Evelyn Cho, combat psychologist, once assigned to evaluate Tier 1 units, discharged after filing a report that called their trauma systemically ignored. Together, they formed the prototype. Shadow Unit 7 reborn not as an elite killing force, but as something more intricate, a hybrid between intelligence, special operations, and moral intervention. Their missions wouldn't be public. Their existence wouldn't be official, but their impact would echo in places where orders failed and conscience took over. Mara briefed them inside a low-lit bunker outside San Diego. No flags, no insignias, just bare concrete and purpose. "You're not soldiers anymore," she began. "You're something smaller, sharper, cleaner. We operate where others hesitate, not because it's dangerous, but because it's inconvenient. You'll face isolation, misinformation, and betrayal. You'll question whether you're still on the right side. That's normal. But remember—" She paused, gaze sweeping the room. "Integrity is the last quiet weapon left in this world." They listened, not with obedience but belief. Their first mission came sooner than expected. Northern Syria, rural outskirts of al-Raqqa. Intelligence suggested a small village had become the testing ground for an illegal bioweapon strain. Official channels wouldn't touch it, too politically volatile. Unofficially, Shadow 7 would investigate, quietly. No insignia, no acknowledgement. They deployed under diplomatic cover, moving through hostile zones disguised as humanitarian medics. The mission was supposed to be surveillance only, no engagement. But nothing in war ever stays clean. The village was half ruined, half alive. Children played near broken walls. Old men guarded wells with rifles from another century. And inside a small medical tent, Mara saw what the reports had buried: local villagers dying from exposure to something that didn't exist in any database. Ramirez took samples, Cho scanned vitals. The pattern was clear: synthetic agent, low dispersion range, high lethality. "This wasn't an accident," Cho whispered. "This was a field test." Mara's jaw tightened. "By who?" Anders raised his scope. "Got movement West Ridge. 2 trucks, military markings stripped." Within minutes, the calm shattered. Gunfire cracked across the village. Shadows moved among the dust, men in unmarked uniforms, disciplined, efficient. Not militia, professionals. Ramirez ducked behind a wall, pulling a child into cover. "They're not here to clean up," she yelled. "They're here to erase it." Mara's mind worked faster than her pulse. Evac pattern Echo 3. Harker, get the bird ready. Anders, suppress north side. Tors, smoke on my mark. The team moved like muscle memory. Not flawless, but fearless. The firefight lasted less than 4 minutes. When it ended, 2 of the attackers were down, the rest retreating into the hills. As the smoke cleared, Mara walked toward the fallen bodies. Their patches were blank, but their dog tags weren't. She picked one up, frowning. "Langley issued serials, these aren't mercs." "Then who?" Ramirez asked. "People with clearance," Mara said darkly. "People who weren't supposed to exist either. They extracted that night under cover of storm clouds, the helicopter blades carving chaos into the rain." Back on the transport, Ramirez sat shaking. Blood streaked across her sleeve, not hers. "I thought we were done with this," she said softly. "Killing ghosts to protect ghosts." Mara looked out the open door, where lightning flashed across the dark horizon. "So did I." Harker called from the cockpit. "Command wants a sitrep." "Tell them we found nothing," Mara said. "What?" Tors asked, disbelief in her voice. "After what we just saw." "If we report this truth," Mara said, "it disappears under bureaucracy. If we bury it, we can follow it quietly. The minute it goes public, it dies." Cho met her gaze. "You're playing chess with people who don't play fair." "I'm not trying to win," Mara said. "I'm trying to survive long enough to make winning possible." 2 weeks later, Washington was silent on the incident. No mention, no debrief. Which, in her world, meant confirmation. Someone in the system had tried to erase evidence, and they'd almost succeeded. Mara stared at the classified envelope on her desk, its seal still unbroken. The orders inside were likely routine on paper, but she knew better. Every directive had hidden meaning now. Every silence had intent. When Reeves called from Coronado, his voice was low. "Word is you're chasing something dangerous." "I always am," she said. "This time's different," he warned. "Whatever happened in Syria, it's tied to something bigger. You sure you want to keep going down that hole?" She hesitated. "You ever stop digging before you hit the truth?" He sighed. "Just remember, the truth doesn't care who finds it first." That night, Mara walked the length of the bunker, watching her new team train under dim emergency lights. Anders sparred with Tors, both fierce, both laughing through exhaustion. Ramirez ran weapon checks. Cho scribbled notes on psychological thresholds. It looked like order. It was. It was barely contained chaos held together by purpose. She paused at the armory door, her reflection staring back from a wall of steel. The tattoo on her forearm glistened faintly in the low light, the spider, the stars. 7, always 7. She whispered to herself, "The web isn't rebuilt by force, it's rebuilt by patience." Behind her, Cho's voice broke the silence. "You're worried." "Always." "Not about them," Cho said, "about you." Mara turned. "You think I'm unraveling?" "I think you never stopped." Mara considered the words. "Maybe unraveling is what lets the light through." Cho tilted her head. "Or maybe it's what makes you forget how much darkness you've absorbed." A week later, the first message came. Encrypted, no sender, just coordinates. Northern Mediterranean. Abandoned oil platform, decommissioned in 2015. Inside, a single line. "The ones you fought in Raqqa weren't testing a weapon. They were testing loyalty." Mara stared at it for a long time. Someone knew her, knew them. And that meant the shadows were moving again. She gathered her team at 400 hours. "Pack light," she said. "We're moving." "Mission parameters?" Anders asked. "None," Mara replied. "We find out who's writing our story before they finish it for us." Ramirez exhaled. "And if it's a trap?" Mara loaded her weapon. chamber clicking like a heartbeat. Then we remind them who built the web they're trying to crawl through. As the transport engines roared to life, the wind tore across the tarmac. Mara looked once more toward the horizon, the same sea that had washed away her past, and whispered, almost to herself, "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought for victory, but for the right to exist." The helicopter lifted, vanishing into the pre-dawn sky. And with it, the reborn shadow of a unit that refused to die, heading straight toward the storm that had started everything. Why did the sea feel different that night? Because it wasn't just water below them, it was memory. And memory, Mara knew, was the heaviest ocean of all. The helicopter skimmed over the dark Mediterranean, its lights cut, rotors low and whispering. Below, a forgotten oil platform jutted from the waves, rusted, skeletal alone. Once a hub of industry, now a graveyard of iron and salt. Inside the aircraft, silence reigned. Every face masked by focus, every heartbeat sinking to the hum of machinery. Mara checked her weapon again, habit, not need. She'd done it 1,000 times before, in wars that officially never happened. Ramirez sat across from her, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Torres double-checked comms. Anders loaded non-lethal rounds for now. Cho sat near the rear, calm but watchful, her psychologist's mind always reading more than people said. Mara spoke into the mic, voice low, 30 seconds. Anders nodded, sliding the door open. The wind rushed in, thick with salt and rain. They dropped fast, harnesses, ropes, silence. Boots hit steel. The platform groaned under their weight, a hollow echo across the endless Black Sea. The storm was rolling in from the west. Lightning cracked far off, illuminating the horizon like the flicker of a dying signal. Ramirez whispered, "This place feels wrong." Mara's eyes swept the shadows. "Good, then we're where we're supposed to be." The oil platform was dead, no lights, no engines, no sound except the hiss of the sea below. But something about it felt staged. Cables ran where they shouldn't. Power lines reconnected with too much precision. And the faint hum of a generator, buried deep inside the main structure, pulsed like a heartbeat trying to hide. Torres crouched near a hatch, gloved fingers tracing its edges. Not corroded. Someone been maintaining this. "Then it's not abandoned," Mara said. Anders scanned the darkness through his NVG. Multiple heat signatures. Lower deck, stationary. "How many?" "3, maybe 4, could be bodies." "Could be bait," Ramirez muttered. Mara nodded. "Exactly, that's why we go slow." They breached in silence, line by line, door by door. The interior was a maze of metal corridors and flickering lights. Rust mixed with new wiring, decay with design. In the central control room, the smell hit first. Not death, antiseptic. Clean, too clean. On a steel table sat a row of canisters, sealed and labeled with military precision. Each one bore a single emblem, a spider with 7 legs. Ramirez froze. "That's your tattoo." Mara's pulse quickened. "No, that's a replica." Cho stepped closer. "Why 7 legs, not 8? Mara's expression darkened, because one didn't come back. Before anyone could speak, the monitors flickered to life. Static cleared. A face appeared, male, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, cold. "Mara," the voice said, calm, familiar, "you made good time." Anders raised his rifle. "Who the hell?" Mara's voice cut through. "Stand down." The man smiled faintly on screen. "It's been a while." Cho glanced at her. "You know him?" Mara didn't answer. Her throat tightened. "Major Colin Ward." Ramirez blinked. "Who's that?" Mara exhaled slowly. "Shadow Unit 7, original command lead." Anders frowned. "I thought all 7 were declared dead." "They were," Ward said through the speakers, "except one who didn't stay buried." Torres whispered, "You mean him?" Ward smiled wider. "I mean both of us." The air seemed to freeze. Ward leaned forward, face half in shadow. You were always the unpredictable one, Mara. The conscience in a team built for things conscience couldn't survive. Do you know what happens when you put morality into a machine designed for war? Mara's voice was low. It breaks. Exactly. And you broke the unit, Mara. Your hesitation cost lives. We could have completed Damascus Gate in 4 hours. Instead, it took 14. And 7 of ours didn't make it. She flinched, barely perceptible, but Cho noticed. That's not what happened, Mara said quietly. Ward's tone hardened. No, you think I don't remember that valley. You think I don't remember the order you refused to give. The others looked at her, confused, searching. What order? Anders asked. Myra didn't respond. Ward did. She refused to detonate the failsafe, the one that would have taken out every hostile in that valley. She couldn't do it because there were civilians nearby. So instead of a clean sweep, we walked into a slaughter. The silence that followed was suffocating. Tors broke it softly. Is that true? Mara's eyes didn't waver. It's true, I made a choice, and I'd make it again. Ward's laugh echoed through the room, hollow, bitter. And now you're recruiting a new version of us, another web to spin the same tragedy. You're behind Raqqa, Mara said, realization hitting. You tested that bioweapon. I didn't test it, Ward replied. I built the oversight network that funds it. You see, I learned something after Damascus Gate. Empathy is inefficient. It slows progress. Progress, Mara snapped. You call experimenting on civilians progress. Ward's voice softened. You think too small. Those weren't civilians, Mara. They were data points. Proof that the next war will be won without soldiers. A clean world free of conscience. Anders stepped forward, fury visible in every line of his body. You're insane. Ward ignored him. You think you're saving the world, Mara, but you're obsolete. The web doesn't need spiders anymore. It needs architects. Then the feed cut. The monitors went black. Ramirez swore under her breath. We're being jammed. Anders turned toward the corridor. Movement, multiple hostiles upper deck. Mara's mind snapped into combat mode. Positions, we hold this level. Tors, lights out. Ramirez, cover our flank. Anders, fire control on my call. The lights died. The platform plunged into darkness. Boots pounded above, descending. Shadows moved against shadows. Anders whispered, they're here. The first burst came fast, suppressed rounds slicing through the air. Ramirez ducked, returning fire. Sparks illuminated the steel. Tors lobbed a flashbang. The corridor exploded in white. Mara moved through it all, precise, deliberate. Her training wasn't noise. It was poetry written in controlled violence. By the time silence returned, 4 hostiles were down. Anders reloaded, breath ragged. We're boxed in, extractions compromised. Then we make our own exit, Mara said. They fought their way upward, floor by floor, through fire and echo. When they reached the deck, the rain hit like shrapnel. The helicopter was gone. Pilot gone dark, Tors yelled over the wind. Mara scanned the horizon, nothing but sea and lightning. Ward's voice returned, now through a loudspeaker hidden in the structure. You can't fight ghosts, Mara. You should have stayed buried with the rest of us. She looked toward the main antenna, blinking red, mocking her. You want ghosts, she murmured. Then you'll get one. She turned to Anders. C4, give me 2 charges. You're blowing the platform. No, she said, attaching the detonators. I'm erasing it. They moved fast. Ramirez covered the rear while Tors synchronized the timers. Ward's voice followed them, calm, patient, chilling. You can destroy evidence, but you can't destroy what you are. You built this web, I just perfected it. Maybe, Mara said into the comms, but perfection has a weakness. It forgets what humanity costs. She pressed the trigger. The explosion tore through the night, swallowing the platform in flame. The shockwave rolled across the sea, scattering rain and ash. They leaped into the dark, 4 figures falling into black water, swallowed by the storm. Hours later, the world was quiet again. A rescue boat, unmarked, anonymous, pulled them from the waves. The operator inside didn't speak, just nodded. A single flash of a coded insignia, General Foster. Myra lay on the deck, coughing seawater, the storm still roaring above. Cho leaned over her. You knew he was alive. I suspected, Myra rasped, but not that he'd fallen that far. And you didn't tell us, Ramirez asked, shaking, angry. I needed proof, Myra said. Now we have it. Proof of what? That corruption doesn't just survive in the shadows, Myra whispered. It grows there. Anders sat beside her, soaked, exhausted. So what now? We just pretend this never happened. Myra turned her head toward him. No, we expose it, but first we rebuild. Back at the bunker, silence greeted them. Half their equipment gone, communications cut. The system was erasing them in real time. Foster's message came through in fragments. Do not engage further. Full blackout protocol, trust no one. Ramirez slammed a fist on the console. They're leaving us out to dry. Myra stayed calm, staring at the blank screen. No, they're protecting us the only way they can, by pretending we don't exist. Torres frowned. Then how do we fight something that's erased us? Myra looked around the room, faces weary, wet, scarred by betrayal. By remembering who we are. They built lies in our names. We'll rebuild truth in theirs. Cho studied her carefully. You're not just fighting Ward, are you? Myra's voice lowered. No, I'm fighting the idea that what he became was inevitable. That night she sat alone in the dark, rain against concrete, wind whispering through cracks in the bunker. The spider tattoo on her arm shimmered faintly under the dim light, 7 stars, one dimmer than the rest. She touched it gently. You should have stayed gone, she murmured, voice breaking for the first time. But maybe this was always where it was headed. For years she'd lived by quiet rules, patience, restraint, precision. But now the game had changed. Ward had weaponized their past. And in doing so, he'd given her something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She opened her encrypted terminal and typed 2 words into the field. Operation Nemesis. Below it she added, Objective, restore the soul of the shadow. She pressed enter. The web began to rebuild, this time not as a secret but as a reckoning. The storm outside eased, the ocean calmed. And somewhere across the dark world, in an unknown location, Major Colin Ward watched a different monitor flicker to life. On it Myra Sullivan, soaked, alive, unbroken. He smiled faintly. So it begins again. He leaned back in his chair, shadows crawling up the walls. The spider always rebuilds the web, but this time I'll be waiting. The screen faded to black. And the war between ghosts born from the same past began anew. Why did she wake before dawn again, staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping? Because conscience never sleeps. It only pretends to when the body gives up. For 3 days, the bunker had been silent except for the low hum of generators and the tap of rain on the roof. Outside, California looked peaceful. Inside, Shadow 7 was being reborn in the dark, stripped of insignias, funding, and friends. Myra Sullivan sat alone at the comms table, the glow of a single screen painting her face in blue light. Lines of code scrolled down, secure channels rerouted, aliases rewritten, encryption keys buried inside forgotten servers. Every keystroke erased one more trace of who they had been. When Torres entered, coffee in hand, she hesitated before speaking. You've been at this for hours. 36, Myra corrected softly. Your eyes look like they've seen a war. They have, Myra said. They're just watching the sequel. At 600 hours, she gathered the team. The room smelled of metal and damp fabric, a temporary haven carved from fatigue. Mara stood before them, posture straight but voice low. Operation Nemesis is live. We're no longer under command authority. From this moment, we act independently. Ramirez frowned. That makes us criminals. Depends on who's writing the history, Mara replied. Anders crossed his arms. So what's the plan? We can't just chase ghosts across continents. We're not chasing them, Mara said, tapping the screen behind her. We're following money. On the monitor, a web of corporations and shell fronts bloomed: medical research firms, private contractors, offshore accounts. At the center of it all, Ward Industries, a defense tech firm supposedly dissolved 5 years ago. Cho leaned forward. He rebuilt Damascus Gate's infrastructure under a civilian cover. Exactly, Mara said. They call it the Human Stability Project: gene-coded neuro-agents, AI-controlled logistics, peace through precision. But look closer and you'll see the same old goal: control without empathy. Anders muttered, and we're supposed to stop that with 6 people. Mara looked at him. 7. He frowned. We only count 6. Her silence stretched. Then she said quietly, the 7th is already in place, an old contact embedded deep in Ward's network, codenamed Spiral. Tors raised an eyebrow. Can we trust them? Mara hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. We'll find out. Their first target, a logistics hub outside Warsaw, disguised as a medical supply distribution center. Satellite scans showed shipments moving in patterns too organized for humanitarian aid. They flew under civilian cover, landing at a decommissioned NATO airstrip. Snow covered the tarmac like dust on an old secret. Anders grinned through his scarf. Back in the cold again, figures. Cold keeps people honest, Mara said. You can't fake warmth out here. Within hours, they had eyes on the compound: concrete, floodlights, drones patrolling the perimeter. Too much security for aspirin shipments. Mara crouched behind an old hangar, scanning through binoculars. Thermal shows 30 inside, 4 patrols. Entry point on the west side, maintenance hatch. Same pattern as Raqqa, Ramirez whispered. Exactly why we're here, Mara said. Ward's repeating the design. Cho monitored signals through a handheld receiver. Encrypted transmissions every 40 seconds. Someone's coordinating remotely. Could be Spiral. Or could be bait, Anders murmured. Mara adjusted her rifle strap. Either way, we go in. Half the truth's better than none. They infiltrated at 2300 hours. No words, just movement, silent, deliberate, synchronized. The snow muffled their steps, turning violence into grace. Inside, sterile corridors hummed with power. The air smelled of ozone and antiseptic, and behind a glass wall, servers blinked like mechanical fireflies. Ramirez hacked into the nearest terminal. Encrypted architecture, layers on layers. Mara leaned over her shoulder. Can you trace it? Maybe, if I can bypass the biometric firewall. You've got 60 seconds. Ramirez's fingers flew. Code flickered. Then the screen cleared. A file appeared labeled simply, Project Ouroboros. Tors frowned. That means snake eating its own tail, symbol of infinity. Cho whispered, or self-destruction. Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered. Anders turned toward the hall. Movement, east corridor. Mara's voice sharpened. Positions. The door burst open. 3 operatives stormed in tactical gear, black visors, no insignia, but their movements too familiar, efficient, coordinated. Anders fired first, grazing one. The figure fell, visor cracking, revealing a young woman's face. Cho gasped, that's Spiral. The woman coughed, blood streaking her lips. You shouldn't have come. Mara knelt beside her. You're Spiral. She nodded weakly. Ward knew you'd follow the coordinates. He wanted you here. Why? To finish what he started. She reached into her vest, trembling, pulling out a data chip. Everything you need is on this. run before. The rest was lost to gunfire. Windows shattered, alarms blared. Red light filled the corridor. Ramirez screamed, "We're blown." Mara grabbed the chip, dragging Spiral toward cover, but the woman shook her head. "Leave me. You can't save both of us." Mara hesitated, the same hesitation Ward had once condemned. The same moment she'd relived every night since Damascus Gate. And then she made a choice. She carried Spiral out anyway. They escaped through the maintenance hatch as explosions tore through the compound. Snow turned black with smoke. The transport van roared across the frozen field, headlights off. Inside, Spiral convulsed. Cho tried to stabilize her, but it was already too late. A cyanide capsule triggered remotely. Ramirez's voice broke. "She was one of us." Mara stared straight ahead. No, she was one of them who remembered she was. Anders slammed the dashboard. "We should have burned that place to the ground." "We will," Mara said, "after we use what she died to give us." She inserted the data chip into her secure terminal. The screen filled with files, operation logs, funding chains, and a single encrypted message. It read, "Project Ouroboros Phase 2, Field Trial, Location Classified, Authorization, Ward/SULLIVAN." Ramirez blinked, "Sullivan as in." Mara's stomach turned cold. "He's using my clearance codes." Torres whispered, "That means he's inside the system again, deep." Mara nodded slowly, "And he's making it look like I'm helping him." By the time they reached their safe house in Berlin, the media had already picked up whispers of a rogue U.S. cell attacking a medical facility in Poland. Grainy photos, false reports, their faces blurred but recognizable enough. They were now the villains of someone else's story. Mara stared at the broadcast on a cracked television. "He's rewriting the narrative in real time." Cho crossed her arms, "So we counter it." "With what? The truth?" Mara's tone was quiet, almost bitter. "The truth doesn't trend." Ramirez set her rifle down. "Then we stop hiding, we go public." Mara shook her head. "They'll label us extremists, traitors." "Maybe," Anders said, "but at least people will start asking questions." She looked at him, weary but intrigued. "You're suggesting exposure." "I'm suggesting survival through transparency," he said. "If everyone's looking at us, they can't erase us again." Mara leaned back thinking. The idea was reckless, dangerous, exactly what Ward wouldn't expect. Finally she said, "If we go public, we need undeniable proof, not words, evidence, visuals, something even the most corrupted mind can't twist." Torres pointed to the map. "Then we go after Phase 2 before he does." "Agreed," Mara said. "We find the field trial, we expose it live." The next 48 hours were a blur of encrypted transmissions, false passports, and restless travel. Every airport felt like a trap, every face a threat. At 300 hours, they reached the outskirts of Tbilisi, Georgia, where intelligence placed Ward's next test, a research facility camouflaged as an agricultural genetics lab. Through rain-streaked binoculars, they saw convoys arriving, scientists, soldiers, corporate suits. Inside, containers marked with the same seven-legged spider symbol. Ramirez's voice was tight. "That's it, it's all here." Mara felt her pulse steady. "Then let's show the world." They split into pairs, Torres and Ramirez to handle broadcast uplink, Anders and Cho to secure the perimeter. Mara moved alone, camera strapped to her vest, live feed transmitting through a hidden satellite channel. Inside the facility, she saw it all, human subjects sedated in pods, data screens tracking neural responses, machines whispering the language of dehumanization. It was Damascus Gate reborn in white lab coats. Her camera streamed every frame to encrypted cloud storage. And then Ward's voice filled the room again, calm as ever. "You never could resist recording the truth, could you?" She spun. He stood behind reinforced glass, older but unmistakably him. The same eyes, bright, calculating, void of regret. "Welcome home, Myra." "You call this home," she said. "Looks more like a grave." He smiled faintly. "Graves and homes aren't that different. Both are where we hide from the living." "Why use my clearance? Why drag my name through the dirt?" "Because you represent conscience," Ward said. "And conscience is the only threat left worth neutralizing." She took a step closer. "You built this to prove you were right, that empathy weakens us." "No," he said softly. "To prove that emotion can be replicated without morality. Once we simulate compassion, we no longer need the real thing." Mara stared at him, horror and pity intertwining. "You're turning humanity into code." "I'm refining it," he said. "The world doesn't need soldiers like us anymore. It needs ghosts who obey." "Then you'll understand why I can't let you finish." She pulled the trigger. The bullet shattered the glass, not his body, just the reflection. He was already gone, pre-recorded. The lab alarm screamed to life. Anders's voice crackled through comms. "You've got hostiles inbound." "Get everyone out," Mara shouted. "Upload complete." Torres replied, 95% wait, signal interference. Static, then silence. Mara looked up at the ceiling cameras, red lights blinking. Ward's voice returned, disembodied and cold. "You think you're showing them the truth, but all they'll see is chaos, a traitor destroying salvation." She whispered, "Then I'll burn salvation to save souls." She set the remaining charges herself, timers blinking. As she exited into the rain, she could see the horizon flare behind her, fire reflecting off wet glass, turning night into day. Back at the safe house, the transmission finally stabilized. The footage was live, every atrocity, every lab, every experiment, broadcast across hundreds of mirrored servers before the system could silence it. Within hours, news outlets scrambled, governments denied, protests erupted, and in the chaos, Shadow 7 vanished again, invisible, untraceable, alive. Ramirez watched the feeds from a cracked laptop. "We did it," she said softly. "The world knows." Mara shook her head. "The world suspects. Knowing takes longer." Cho leaned against the wall. "Then what's next?" Mara looked out the window, rain washing the neon from the streets. "Ward's still out there. The machine still breathes. Until it stops, we move." Anders smirked tiredly. "Still ghosts, huh?" Mara's gaze hardened. "No, not ghosts anymore. We're reminders." She turned back to the screen, where the seven-legged spider logo burned across every broadcast. "Let them see what we became," she murmured. "Maybe they'll learn before they repeat it." Outside, lightning split the clouds, the same storm that had started this war now returning to wash the slate clean. And somewhere far away, in a bunker mirrored to theirs, Colin Ward watched the same footage with a quiet smile. He whispered to no one, "Perfect. Now they'll all come to me seeking truth, fearing her." He closed the laptop, the glow fading to black. In the silence that followed, Mara's words echoed across the world she was trying to save. "Sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to reopen it." Why was the world suddenly talking about her again, and yet not one voice spoke her name correctly? Because the truth, when it finally escapes, never travels in a straight line. It bends, fractures, and breaks depending on who catches it first. Mara Sullivan's face was everywhere now, or rather, the version of it they wanted people to see. Grainy surveillance stills, fabricated dossiers, a patchwork villain stitched together by frightened governments and angry corporations. On one network, she was a terrorist. On another, a whistleblower. On a few corners of the internet, she was a saint. She stared at the muted television in their safe house. Her own image flickered in low resolution, mouth froze in mid-sentence, eyes shadowed by a frame someone had edited to make her look monstrous. And yet somewhere out there people were waking up, questioning, arguing, remembering what conscience looked like. "Congratulations," Anders muttered from behind her. "You're officially the world's most wanted hero." She didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You did what you said you would, exposed them. The footage, still being downloaded faster than they can scrub it. People are protesting outside embassies. Even Congress is." "I didn't do this to start riots," Mara cut in quietly. "I did it to start reflection." Anders gave a humorless laugh. "Reflection doesn't trend, outrage does." She finally looked at him. "Then maybe outrage is what it takes to get people to feel again." 2 days after the broadcast, their network fractured. Cho's feeds were full of new data, chatter, disinformation, and something worse, mimicry. A dozen new groups had appeared online, calling themselves Children of the Web. They claimed allegiance to Mara, quoting her edited phrases, twisting them into manifestos. Ramirez threw down her tablet in disgust. "They're stealing your words." Mara's voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. "No, they're misunderstanding them. There's a difference." Torres frowned. "They're talking about purging corruption violently. That's not misunderstanding, that's weaponization." Cho leaned forward. "You lit a spark, Mara. You can't control how others use the fire." Mara turned away, staring out the cracked window at the neon-drenched streets below. "I never wanted control. I wanted awareness." "And now?" Anders asked. "Now," she said softly, "awareness has teeth." They moved again that night, new safe house, new aliases, same ghosts chasing their scent. Berlin had become too loud. They chose a quieter city, Reykjavik, Iceland, where cold kept secrets better than men ever could. The bunker there was older, colder, built into volcanic rock. It suited them. As they unpacked, Torres found an envelope waiting at the door. No postage, no fingerprints, just a symbol drawn in black ink. A spider, but this one whole, 8 legs, not 7. Ramirez glanced at Mara. "You think it's him?" Mara nodded once. Ward never could resist poetry. Inside was a single USB drive. No message. Cho cautioned, "It's a trap." "I know," Mara said. "That's why we open it." She inserted it into a secure offline terminal. The screen lit up with a single file, video footage. At first static, then clarity. A room dim, metallic, surgical. And strapped to a table, blindfolded and breathing fast, was Sarah Chen. Ramirez gasped. "She was from Coronado, she helped you." Mara's throat tightened. "She disappeared months after the training evaluation." Ward's voice filled the speakers, soft and cruel. "Recognition complete. Emotional stimulus confirmed. Welcome back, Commander." The camera panned to reveal him, calm, almost casual, sleeves rolled up. He continued, "You built your truth around the idea that empathy saves. Let's see how it holds when I take one of yours apart." Mara clenched her fists, jaw tightening as the feed showed him press a button, not violence but sedation. Chen's body went still. "Don't worry," Ward said on screen. "I'm not a monster. I'm just removing unnecessary pain. You'll understand when you find her." The feed cut. The silence afterward was colder than the Icelandic air. Cho broke it. "That wasn't a threat, that was a summons." Mara nodded. "He wants me to follow, he knows I will." Anders slammed a hand against the wall. "We can't just walk into another setup." "He's not setting a trap this time," Mara said. "He's setting a mirror. He wants to see if I'll break it." For 2 days she studied the metadata. Hidden within the static frames, Ramirez found coordinates, northern Finland, near an abandoned mining facility. "That's his base," Torres said. "No," Mara corrected, "that's his theater." "Same difference." "Not quite," Mara said. "A base is where you hide, a theater is where you perform." Anders looked at her. "So what's his act?" "Redemption," Mara said softly. "He wants to prove he can save what I couldn't." They arrived under darkness, snow blurring the world into monochrome silence. The mine was a scar carved into frozen earth, half collapsed, half reborn with new scaffolding and generator lights humming below the surface. The team advanced in formation. No chatter, no radio, only trust. Inside, the tunnels glowed faintly with pale light, sterile, surgical, wrong. They followed the hum until it split into human sound, the low rhythm of breathing machines. Mara raised a hand signaling stop. She moved ahead alone. The chamber opened like a wound. In its center stood a glass pod, condensation blurring what was inside. She wiped the surface. It was Sarah Chen, alive but barely. Tubes in her arms, monitors displaying unfamiliar readings. Ramirez whispered, "She's stable." "Not for long," Cho said. "That serum isn't medical, it's suppressive." Then Ward's voice came from the darkness behind them. "Always playing doctor, aren't you, Evelyn?" They turned. He stood there unarmed, smiling. His face looked older now, lined with purpose instead of guilt. "Welcome to Phase 3, he said softly, "where the ghosts decide whether to stay dead." Mara's hand hovered near her holster. "You shouldn't have brought her into this." "She volunteered," Ward said. "She wanted to see if your cause was worth her pain." Mara's voice was low, dangerous. "You're lying." "Am I?" Ward stepped closer, slowly. "You and I used to believe in the same thing: precision, control, the elegance of calculated violence. But you changed. You started to believe in the myth of conscience, that it could guide a weapon without dulling it. Tell me how that working out." Anders raised his rifle, stepped back. Ward didn't move. "You can kill me, sure. But every broadcast, every file you released, all of it came through my systems. You didn't leak the truth, Mara. I let you. Because chaos legitimizes control." Mara's breath hitched. "You wanted this." "I needed it," Ward said. "The world had gone soft. It needed fear again, heroes and villains to justify the walls we build. You gave them both." Cho shook her head. "You orchestrated the outrage." Ward smiled faintly. "And look how obediently they rallied. Governments uniting under new security protocols, corporations merging to fight misinformation. The Human Stability Project just doubled its funding, all thanks to your courage." Mara's voice trembled with rage and despair. "You used me." "No," Ward said, "I completed you." For the first time, her hand faltered. The barrel of her pistol lowered slightly. He saw it and stepped closer. "You still think this is about morality. It's not. It's about narrative, and you lost control of yours the moment you tried to make it pure." Behind him, Chen's vitals began to drop. The pod hissed, frost crawling across its seams. Mara's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Ward's expression softened almost tenderly. "Letting you make your choice again." He gestured toward the control panel. 2 buttons, one marked Purge, the other Stabilize. "Purge ends this experiment," he said. "Destroys all evidence, all data, including her. Stabilize keeps her alive but transfers the system back online. The serum will spread. You can't save both the truth and the person. So tell me, Commander, what's empathy worth now?" Silence. Torres whispered, "Don't." Ramirez's voice broke. "She's one of us." Mara stared at the panel. The weight of every past decision pressed into her bones. Damascus Gate, Raqqa. Every life she'd saved by losing others. Her hand hovered. Ward's eyes gleamed. "Go on, prove me right." Mara closed her eyes. Then, without hesitation, she drew her weapon and fired not at the buttons, but at the generator core. The lights exploded into darkness. Sparks rained down. Ward stumbled backward, laughing. "Still can't choose cleanly, can you?" Mara's voice came through the chaos. "You were right about one thing: I don't believe in clean choices, only necessary ones." The explosion ripped through the tunnel, swallowing sound, light, and shadow alike. When she woke, the air was heavy with smoke. Her ears rang. Tor's hand was on her shoulder. "You're alive," Chen's breathing. Ward's gone. Mara looked toward the ruined control room, twisted metal, flickering lights, no sign of him. "He's not dead," she whispered. "No," Torres agreed softly, "but he's finished." Mara sat up slowly, the weight of everything pressing into her chest. Cho approached, holding a bloody data drive, half melted, half intact. "We recovered this, maybe enough to expose him for good." Mara took it carefully, "or enough to bury us deeper." Anders limped over, shaking his head. "So what now?" She stared at the faint glow of the drive. "Now we decide whether we're still fighting him or the reflection he left behind." Outside, snow fell again, gentle as ash. For the first time in months, Mara allowed herself to breathe, really breathe, and it hurt. Because survival, she realized, wasn't the same as peace. Hours later, when the team finally extracted, the world was already shifting. Governments called the Finland explosion an industrial accident. Ward's name was nowhere. Chen was transferred to a safe hospital under Foster's protection. But deep in encrypted corners of the web, a new symbol appeared, the full spider, eight-legged, gleaming white. And below it a message. "She chose mercy, I choose memory, CW." Ward was still alive. And the war wasn't over. That night, standing beneath the northern lights, Mara whispered into the frozen wind, not to Ward, not to her team, but to herself. "Maybe we were never meant to win," she said softly. "Maybe we were meant to remind them what losing their humanity looks like." Her voice broke, quiet but resolute. "And if that's my role, I'll wear it." The lights above shimmered, green, violet, white, reflections of something vast and ancient. For a moment, she looked almost weightless, like a ghost the world had tried to erase but couldn't. And as she turned to rejoin her team, her words lingered in the frozen air. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Why did the air itself feel thinner tonight? Because endings always steal a little oxygen before they arrive. Weeks had passed since Finland, weeks that bled together into silence and coded transmissions. Governments had issued their denials, committees had held their hearings, and the news cycle had already begun to move on. The world had almost convinced itself the whole thing had been an accident. Almost. Mara Sullivan sat in a cabin on the Norwegian coast, the sea stretching out like a gray infinity. Every morning she woke before dawn. Every night she told herself she was done. And every time before the sun rose, she turned the radio back on, because some part of her still believed in signals through static. Outside, the wind howled like an unanswered call. Inside, the remaining members of Shadow 7 gathered around a small wood stove. Ramirez, Anders, Torres, Cho, fewer now but tighter, bound by the kind of loyalty that doesn't come from orders, it comes from shared ghosts. Cho was the first to break the quiet. Ward's message went global this morning, the symbols showing up in protests from Tokyo to Chicago. People think he's the one exposing corruption now. Anders rubbed his temples. "He hijacked our truth again." Mara stared into the flames. "That's what he does. He doesn't destroy the message, he infects it." Torres leaned forward. "Then what do we do? Fight fire with fire?" Mara shook her head. "You can't outburn a man who lives in the flames." Ramirez slammed her mug down. "Then we end it for real this time." The room went still. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it. Finally, Mara said it for them. "We find him." The trail came from Foster. A single, unmarked message pinged their encrypted line. "Final asset location, Arctic sector, under communications cover Helios array. Proceed at discretion. No reinforcements, finish it." Cho whispered, "She's giving you permission to disappear." Mara folded the paper once, slid it into her jacket. Maybe disappearing is the only way this ends clean. That night they prepared without speaking, weapons stripped and reassembled, maps marked. Each of them knew it could be a one-way mission. No one said so. At dawn, they lifted off in a transport chopper painted white to blend with snow. The world below turned to frost and cloud. When the GPS failed, as expected, they navigated by instinct. By the time the Arctic sun bled through the haze, the Helios array came into view. An old satellite relay station swallowed by ice, its dishes bent toward a sky that no longer listened. And somewhere inside, Ward waited. They landed half a kilometer out. The wind bit hard, freezing breath into shards. Mara led them through the white. Every step crunched like broken glass. When they reached the main structure, Anders sliced through the steel door with a torch. Inside, heat, power, a hum too steady for an abandoned facility. "Active servers," Ramirez whispered. "He's running something big." Torres checked her weapon, or someone. Mara moved down the corridor. She knew the rhythm of this place before she'd even entered it. The same sterile architecture she'd seen in Raqqa, in Damascus, in every ghost lab Ward had ever left behind. This was his cathedral. And at its center, he waited, standing before a console lit with blue holograms that painted his face in cold light. "Mara," he said, voice steady, "right on schedule." Anders raised his rifle, hands where I can see them. Ward didn't flinch. "You still don't understand. I never needed to hide. The world built this for me." Mara stepped forward. "You built it on corpses." He turned, studying her the way scientists study weather patterns. "Corpses are just data points waiting to teach us something. You of all people should appreciate efficiency." "I appreciate consequence," she said. Ward smiled faintly. "And yet here you are, chasing me across continents because you can't live without the fight. Admit it, Mara. You and I are the same equation, just with different outcomes." "No," she said quietly. "You forgot why we started counting." He gestured to the screens. "Look around you. The Helios array isn't a weapon, it's preservation. Everything we've gathered, memories, behaviors, genetic imprints, it's all here. A digital Noah's Ark when humanity destroys itself. This will rebuild what's left." Cho's eyes widened. "You're cloning consciousness." Ward nodded, refining it free of weakness, free of empathy. Mara stared at the shifting lights. Thousands of neural maps floated like constellations. "You call that preservation. It's mutilation." "It's salvation," he corrected softly. "The species gets to start over without guilt." "You can't erase guilt," she said. "It's the proof we had a soul." For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes, annoyance, maybe sorrow. "You think you can still save the old world. It doesn't want to be saved. It just wants permission to feel righteous while it burns." She lifted her pistol. "Then I'll deny it that permission." He didn't move. "If you destroy this, Mara, you end everything we've learned. All those lives you swore to protect, they'll vanish here." She hesitated, finger on the trigger. Ward stepped closer. "You've spent your whole life proving empathy isn't weakness. Here's your chance, prove it, don't pull the trigger." The others watched, breath held. Every echo of every moral argument she'd ever fought came crashing down in that one heartbeat. Then she lowered the gun, only to toss it to Anders. "Set the charges." Ward blinked. "You can't destroy an idea." "No," she said, "but I can erase its altar." He moved suddenly, desperate now, reaching for the console. Ramirez fired first, a clean shot to disable his arm. The room erupted in chaos, sirens, sparks, alarms. Torres shouted, "Detonators armed." Mara faced him one last time. "You always said the web had to evolve. Maybe you were right, but evolution without empathy isn't progress, it's extinction." He sank to his knees, blood blooming across the snow-white floor. "You'll never escape what we made." "I don't plan to," she said. "I plan to outlive it." She hit the switch. The blast tore upward through the ice, a column of fire and light that turned the Arctic sky into dawn. The Helios array collapsed, its antennas melting into twisted silhouettes. When the dust settled, there was only wind. Hours later, a rescue drone found a single beacon signal, faint, pulsing from the edge of the crater. Mara lay half buried in snow, suit torn, face pale but alive. Anders and Ramirez dragged her free, coughing, frostbitten, breathing. "Ward," Anders asked. "Gone," she rasped, "but his code won't die easy." They looked around, the horizon empty, endless. For once, the silence felt clean. Weeks passed. Governments scoured the wreckage. Every database tied to Ward's network was wiped, corrupted beyond recovery. No proof of the Human Stability Project remained, except whispers and the footage Mara's team had hidden in fail-safe servers before the explosion. General Foster met Mara at a secure facility outside London. The reunion was quiet, almost tender. "You did it," Foster said. Mara shook her head. "I delayed it." "That's enough," Foster said. "History needs pauses." Mara smiled faintly. "Then consider this one borrowed." Foster hesitated. "You could come back in, lead the task force again, help us rebuild." Mara looked out the window. "I think rebuilding's someone else's turn." "What will you do?" She thought for a long time before answering. "Disappear. Let the myth die so the meaning can live." Foster nodded slowly. "You know they'll keep looking for you." "I know," a small smile. "Maybe they'll find something better instead." That night she returned to the coast. The sea was calm again. The northern lights rippled across the horizon like faint echoes of everything she'd burned. Torres and Ramirez met her there. No uniforms, no weapons, just coffee and quiet. Anders had gone home to his family. Joe had taken a post with the Red Cross. The web had finally loosened. They stood together in silence until Ramirez spoke. "Do you ever wonder if he was right, that maybe people need control to survive?" Mara shook her head. "People don't need control, they need conscience." Torres smiled faintly. "And if conscience fails?" "Then it's our job to remind it what it looks like," Mara said. The wind rose off the water, carrying the sound of waves against stone, steady, unending. She took a long breath, tasting salt and freedom and grief all at once. "For years," she said, "I thought strength meant not breaking, but maybe real strength is what you do after you already have." Ramirez glanced at her arm. The spider tattoo had faded now, the ink almost ghostly beneath her skin. "7 stars," Ramirez murmured, "still there." Mara smiled. "Always there, they just shine quieter now." Somewhere far from that coast, deep within an anonymous data farm, a single corrupted file flickered back to life. Its code reorganized, rewrote, renamed itself. HELIO 2, initiating. A faint digital voice whispered through the server hum. "Evolution requires empathy, removed." Then silence. Mara watched the dawn break over the horizon, unaware of the whisper but feeling its weight anyway, the way soldiers feel weather before it turns. She whispered to the sea, as if speaking to ghosts. "We did what we could. The rest belongs to whoever still believes." The tide rolled in, soft and endless. And for the first time since Damascus Gate, she let the world move without her. As the camera would fade on her silhouette, wind in her hair, boots in the surf, the narrator's voice would soften. History will forget her name, as it forgets all inconvenient truths. But somewhere in the quiet spaces between fear and hope, her echo remains. A whisper reminding those who listen that humanity's greatest weapon was never power, nor control. It was the courage to feel. And when the waves closed over the last footprints on the shore, only that whisper remained. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.